Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are talking about campaign financing. Look at where we are. Sri Lanka, $7.6 million spent on an election campaign by a foreign force. We don't know. We do not have substantial evidence to prove this claim. This is an expose made by New York Times based on the investigations in the country itself. Our final round. Let's start off with Shamindra Ferdinand, news editor of The Island, who's also a journalist. Shamindra, now you've been a journalist for many years now, working for The Island. Do you think New York Times would go to the extent of lying about something of this sort?
I go with what Krishmal said. I go with what he said. Remember how the Western media, the British and the American media alleged Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and paved the way for US-led invasion. More than 10 years after the invasion, they are yet to find anything. So the Western media too can manipulate situations, and poor countries like us and do certain things. But I strongly believe that there's some basis for this story because it's based on information obtained by government agencies here, and they can easily, on a court order, obtain further assistance from the Standard Chartered Bank and identify the people. Now they have identified, they have said that a certain popular monk received $38,000. Then two persons or two checks were handed over to temple trees. So it's obviously they know the people who encash the checks. So it's up to this government to reveal the names. They can reveal the name of the monk, the priest, and the people who took money, and reveal all the people who took money from that particular China Hub account.
So you're very simply saying if Dayasri Jayasekara's driver could go and encash a check, and that is public information now, and if 2 or 3 members of the Sujiva Senasinghe camp went and encashed the checks that he received from Mendes and co, this is simple.
Very simple. And Arjuna Mahendra sent his PN, I think, the central bank PN, to do the same.
Thank you very much, Shamindra Ferdinand. It's on days like this I miss Faraz, to be very honest. I now move my attention to Asoka Besekar, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. In all this, Asoka, as an organization, Transparency International, what must the public do? Are we supposed to look up and think, okay, $7.6 million amounting to 1.1 billion Sri Lankan rupees, everything is hunky-dory, let's forget about it and let's think about the next election that's going to happen in the country. Is that the option that is left for us as a general public? Or can we do something more about it?
I mean, I think this is about priorities. And I mean, it's fair to say that a voter, when they cast their vote, there are a whole host of different things that may go through their mind, but typically it's about how can the individual who's seeking office assist me. Therefore, how can they help me or my child get a job, as an example. Is this issue about campaign finance and everything else really that big a deal? Arguably not. That said, I mean, no one would have ever said that President Sirisena would have yielded enough votes in the 2015 presidential election. I mean, there was a lot of belief there. I would say that lots of voters have now been shortchanged by this government, who have not really driven the changes in political culture that they promised. So I think, as far as the public is concerned, the public now needs to see whether the political leaders at the moment are willing to deliver on what they have said that they will deliver on.
Thank you very much, Asoka Besekar, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Krishmal Varanasuriya, member of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. He's representing the Bar Association of the country, so if I ask him a question about what he thinks about his organization in terms of the current scenario, just remove your hat for the moment, with your permission, of course, Krishmal. Can I pose a question to you?
In general.
In general, is that
Well, I'm representing the bar, so I'll have to look at the bar's point of view also.
Right, okay. So my question to you is very simple. Let's talk about the civil rights organizations that are present in the country. Mr. Gunasekara said civil rights organizations have to do more. In a situation like this, what is the role of the civil society at this point of time? What must we really do? We see names being brought in. We see the name of Gotabaya Rajapaksa being brought in. I recollect on this very show you have said, why must we slide back to an era which we said we don't want anymore? My question to you is, what is the role of civil society when you hear about revelations like this? What must
I think I can balance both, Samir, both as an activist in civil society and as a member of the bar. Because there was a public interested citizen who challenged this very China port deal, Hambantota deal, in the Supreme Court, and I appeared. So I, as a member of the bar, I can discuss this issue. And in that case, there were several questions raised, which none of us are now talking about. Whether the Chinese actually wiped off our debt as they said they were going to do, and then was there an actual debt to equity swap as was stated in Parliament, and how that entire China deal that this present government went through, and the Sri Lanka Ports Authority itself sent a separate counsel, retained a separate counsel to court, saying that they objected to this deal going through. And then suddenly that counsel was overnight removed. It is recorded in the Supreme Court. That counsel was overnight removed and the case given back to the Attorney General, asking the Attorney General to go to court instead for the Ports Authority. So there were questionable transactions even by the present government with regard to the Hambantota port. So therefore, that urges a need for civil society, public spirited individuals out there, perhaps led by the Bar Association, as we did at one time. We came out on the road, we challenged several things. Perhaps it's time that we rose up again and became a bit more vociferous, and other organizations, because we as a bar don't want anyone to play politics with this news. Because if this present, for example, now Shaminder said some story of a monk having received money without saying the name, then there's someone else having got money. If that is being put now to cast a threat or a warning to someone, as Kesara said, without taking action, all these years we could have taken action. Without doing that, mentioning and dropping a few names in the media saying we know, now if you shout anymore, we are going to go. So if this is being used as a political gimmick or a political obstacle to suppress your political opponents, then as a bar we can't stand for it, because we always stand for an equal right of a citizen to choose freely. And you are impinging upon that right of a citizen to choose freely if you are using things like this as political gimmicks to suppress your political opponents. So that also the citizens of this country must be careful. But remember, the bar has always stood with you, and we will continue to fight for you, as we have sworn an oath on this constitution to do, and we will continue to protect your rights.
Thank you very much, Krishma Varansurya, representing the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Mr. Kesara Gunasekara, a former Member of Parliament of the UPFA, also a council member of the Behavioural Mountain Municipal Council, now representing the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Mr. Gunasekara, in all this, what we've heard about campaign financing, what is important right now? What should be the priority of politicians to ensure that there is a transparent accountability process or mechanism in place to ensure that the money they receive, the money that they spend, are documented and the people have public knowledge of it? What must they do?
They should bring in laws. They should bring in regulations. It's not something that can be that takes weeks and weeks. No, rubbish. They can bring it in 2-3 weeks time. But the question is, do they have the will to do that? That's the issue.
But Mr. Gunasekara, you just heard what Asoka said about the non-declaration of assets. There is two fines. There is one for 3,000 rupees or a little bit more than that if you have not declared your assets, and then you have 1 year rigorous imprisonment. But we always resort to giving the 3,000 rupee fine,
and not the
rigorous imprisonment. Can you, even though we have the regulations in place, do you think that it will be implemented to the fullest?
It has not been implemented, and that's a question to the judiciary. That's a question to the judiciary. If you read some of the, in fairness, if you read some of the judgments delivered, I also ask questions about it. There is a problem. We need to understand that all sectors are going down, all sectors of society. And that is very sad. And the root of the problem is Parliament. Huh? If Parliament takes control, everything can be put to right. The question is Parliament willing to do it? I have another question. Has Sri Lanka benefited by this multi-party system? Has Sri Lanka benefited? Sinhalese are divided, Tamils are divided, Muslims are divided. And we still have parties. Where do you think we'll go? These are questions. People will have to sit, talk and decide what is going to be the best for this country. That's very essential. And once you put systems in place, once you put regulations in place, then we can move forward. Without that, I don't think so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kesara Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament of the United People's Freedom Alliance. You say that where do you think the people would go? Where do you think we will go? I don't even think the government knows where it's going at the moment. So that question I leave it to the people to think and ponder upon. Thank you very much, Asoko Bisekara, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka, for joining us this evening on the show. Shamindra Ferdinando, News Editor of The Island, who's also a journalist, joining us on the show tonight, and also Krishmal Varansurya, Member of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, joining us this evening on the show as well. It's always nice to hear you speak. I'm looking forward to having you here on this very seat next time, not as a member of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, but as a member of the civil rights organization that you're representing. Probably then you'll be very much more candid. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon on the show. Thank you very much, Nadim. Thank you very much, Sonali Vanagavati, who's also an attorney at law, for joining us this evening on the show. I leave you tonight with the quote, as I always do. Trust, honesty, humility, transparency and accountability are the building blocks of a positive reputation. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Some words to ponder as far as the politicians of this country are concerned. Take care and good night.